So pop star Demi Lovato is making the headlines for at least the second time this year. Because earlier this year, she made the headlines for coming out as pansexual on Joe Rogan's podcast, meaning that she's attracted to all of the self-identified genders that people identify with today. This time, she's making the headlines for identifying as non-binary and says that she wants to start being referred to as them or they. And earlier, she said,
I want to take this moment to share something very personal with you. Over the past year and a half, I've been doing some healing and self-reflective work. And through this work, I've had the revelation that I identify as non-binary. With that said, I'll officially be changing my pronouns to they, them. I feel that this best represents the fluidity I feel in my gender expression and allows me to feel most authentic and true to the person I both know I am and still am discovering.
She talked more about this on a new podcast that she's launching, where she said, it would mean the world if people could start identifying me as them, they. Now, if you pay attention to her words carefully, you'll notice a fundamental belief behind what she's saying that I think represents the train of thought that's driving so much of our culture's thinking today. Or maybe you won't. You might not notice it because that assumption is so ingrained into the fabric of our society today that it's simply assumed. It's not even argued for. So many of us have just absorbed it without even stopping to even question it. We can break that assumption up into two parts. All right, so the first part has to deal with self-discovery. Put simply, the belief is that the way that you come to know who you truly are is by looking inside of yourself and seeing how you feel deep down. Your truest and most authentic self is found inside of you. Now, this thought may seem just basic to a lot of us today, but it's a thought that's actually unique to us, and it's not characteristic of any of the other cultures throughout history. The second part of the assumption has to do with the rest of the world and how they respond. So this assumption is that your deepest happiness and fulfillment doesn't come from simply realizing who you are, but instead it comes by living out that discovery in public and having other people validate and accept it. Since you're expressing your deepest and your truest self and putting that out there in public, then people accepting that means that they accept you for who you really are deep down at your core. But at the same time, any rejection of your self-expression is seen as a fundamental rejection of who you are at core. This is why Demi can refer to her coming out as non-binary as being vulnerable when she says, sharing this with you now opens another level of vulnerability for me. She believes that she's being vulnerable because she's opening herself up to being attacked and rejected, not for simply a thought or a feeling that she has, but instead for who she really is at the deepest level. This is why she said it would mean the world to her if people started referring to her as them or they, because to her, this means acceptance of who she fundamentally is. But the thing about it, for those of us that are Christians, we know that the things that she's ultimately seeking, she can have and she can find in God. She's seeking to get acceptance from somewhere outside of herself. But in reality, God is the only one who will unconditionally accept and love her, and not because of anything that Demi has done, or because she's famous or a celebrity, or because she's confessed these sorts of things to the world. She could be rightly related to God for the same reason that all of us can be rightly related to God. And that's only because of the life that Jesus Christ lived and died in our place. He was rejected so that way we could be accepted. So now, going back to Demi's beliefs, Demi believes that her truest self is to be celebrated. But think about it. There are obvious times when a truest self shouldn't be celebrated. For example, if a mother truly feels deep down inside that she isn't a mother, would we congratulate her for living out her truth and abandoning her child? Of course we wouldn't. Now, I can already hear you. You may be tempted to be thinking, well, that example may be different because there's another person that's directly involved. But let's just say that we have a person who's attracted to minors that expresses their true feelings of being attracted to minors. Would we consider that something to be celebrated? Most of us would say no. So the only point I want to make here is that our truest self is not always something to be celebrated, even in a non-biblical worldview. Now, I know that Demi identifies as a Christian, and she's talked a lot about her beliefs over the years, and that's why I'm bringing this up here. From a Christian perspective, the Bible tells us that an over-focus on ourselves and how we feel inside is actually the problem in the world, not the solution. In fact, staying true to our feelings and acting in accordance with them is often what makes the world a worse place. For example, agape love in the Bible doesn't mean having a warm feeling towards another person or an enemy, but instead it means treating them with love, respect, and care despite not having those warm feelings towards them. This means not acting on your truest and most authentic feelings that you have deep down, but instead acting opposed to those feelings. In Christianity, it's not a virtue to simply go along with what we feel inside. That's the easiest thing in the world to do. Instead, the harder thing for us to do is to discipline ourselves to go against what we might feel strongly about deep down inside, and that's for others rather than for ourselves and our own self-expression. And of course, that might mean doing things that might tick off the world but would please God, not the other way around. So the point here is that our truest selves often express our sinful nature, which brings forth a lot of the problems in the world rather than the solutions, and brings forth sin rather than salvation. So celebrating our truest selves isn't a good thing in and of itself, not only practically speaking in the world, but also given the Christian worldview that Demi Lovato says that she identifies with. Now, I want you to take note of the self-discovery mindset that we just talked about and see how that plays into the reason that Katy Perry decided to leave Christianity altogether. See if you can spot the overlaps. Go ahead and click on this video to see what I mean, but the next time you find yourself looking inside to how you feel in order to know who you really are, what are you gonna say? What do you mean?